everyone, and welcome back to Story Essence Podcast. I'm Sarah, and wow, do we have an incredible episode for you today.
And I'm Marcus. We are so excited to dive into something that's going to absolutely change how you understand the human experience. Today we're starting our deep dive into The Body Keeps the Score, Part 1, Understanding Trauma.
This is going to be amazing, Marcus. Before we jump in, though, if you're new here, Story Essence Podcast is all about breaking down the most transformative books and ideas in ways that actually matter to your daily life. And trust me, this topic, it matters to literally everyone.
Absolutely. So here's what we're going to uncover today. And Sarah, I have to say, when I first learned this stuff, it completely blew my mind. We're talking about trauma, but not in the way most people think about it.
Oh my gosh, yes. Marcus, let me ask you, when you hear the word trauma, what comes to mind?
Well, I used to think it was just soldiers coming back from war, or people who survived terrible accidents. But Sarah, that's exactly the misconception we're going to shatter today.
Exactly. So let's start with the big question. What is trauma really? And Marcus, this is where it gets fascinating. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk explains that trauma isn't just a bad memory or an upsetting event. It's something much deeper and more profound.
Here's the definition that changed everything for me, Sarah. Trauma is an overwhelming experience that shatters the normal sense of control, safety, and predictability in life. But here's the key part. It overwhelms the body's and brain's ability to cope. Instead of processing the event and returning to balance, the nervous system becomes stuck in survival mode.
Wait. Stuck in survival mode? Marcus, can you break that down? Because I think this is where people get confused.
Absolutely. So here's the key distinction. A stressful event becomes trauma when the person cannot fully process or integrate it. The memory isn't stored as an ordinary narrative with a beginning, middle, and end. Instead, it gets imprinted as raw sensations, emotions, and fragmented images.
And this is why the book is called The Body Keeps the Score. The body literally remembers trauma in its cells, muscles, hormones, and neural pathways. Sarah here, and honestly, when I first learned this, I got chills, like actual chills.
Right? It's incredible. Now, Sarah, let's talk about the different types of trauma, because this is where people really start to recognize themselves. Van der Kolk breaks this down into several categories, and I guarantee everyone listening will identify with at least one of these.
Okay, so first we have acute trauma. This is a single overwhelming event. Think car accident, natural disaster, sudden assault. These are the ones most people recognize as trauma.
Then there's chronic trauma, repeated exposure over time. This could be domestic violence, bullying, or ongoing abuse. And Sarah, this is where it gets really important. The repetition actually changes how the brain develops and functions.
And then we get to complex trauma or developmental trauma. This happens during childhood, especially in the context of attachment. Marcus, this one hits hard because we're talking about neglect, abandonment, parental addiction, inconsistent caregiving. These experiences literally shape the child's brain and sense of self.
Now here's something that absolutely blew my mind, Sarah. Van der Kolk talks about big T trauma versus small t trauma. Big T is those life-threatening or catastrophic events. But small t trauma? That's the subtle but destabilizing stuff. Constant criticism, repeated rejection, chronic insecurity.
Oh, wow, Marcus. So you're saying that even those smaller experiences can accumulate and have serious impact? That's huge. Because how many of us have experienced constant criticism or repeated rejection?
Exactly. And this leads us to something absolutely staggering. Trauma as a public health crisis. Sarah, get ready for this because these statistics are going to shock you. Trauma is far more common than most people realize, and it's not limited to soldiers or disaster survivors.
You're absolutely right, Marcus. So many people are living with hidden trauma. Childhood abuse, car crashes, medical procedures, even witnessing violence. And here's the part that really got to me. Unprocessed trauma is linked to almost every major social and medical problem you can think of.
We're talking depression, anxiety, substance abuse, obesity, heart disease, and suicide. Van der Kolk calls trauma the most ignored and misunderstood epidemic of our time. Sarah, when I read that, I had to put the book down and just sit with it for a moment.
I
exactly what you mean. Now, Marcus, let's get into the science because this is where it gets really fascinating. How does trauma actually affect our nervous system?
Okay, so our nervous system has two major survival responses. First is fight or flight. That's mobilization to face danger. Then there's freeze or shutdown, immobilization when escape seems impossible. Now, here's the problem. In trauma, the brain can get stuck in these states.
So even when the threat is gone, the body continues to behave as if danger is still present? That explains so much. Marcus, what does this actually look like in daily life?
Great question. The symptoms include hypervigilance, constantly scanning for danger, exaggerated startle response, jumping at every unexpected sound, dissociation, feeling disconnected from your body or reality, flashbacks, nightmares, emotional numbness. And here's the key insight, Sarah. Trauma is not just about bad memories. It's about the body continuing to live in the trauma.
The body continuing to live in the trauma. Wow. Okay, Marcus, now let's dive into what's happening in the brain, because this is where Kolk really breaks it down for us. He highlights 3 critical brain areas affected by trauma.
First is the amygdala. Kolk calls it the smoke detector. It constantly scans for danger, which is normally a good thing. But in traumatized individuals, it becomes hyperactive, triggering fear and alarm even when there's no real threat present.
Then there's the medial prefrontal cortex, the watchtower. This normally regulates the amygdala, helping us assess danger rationally. But Marcus, in trauma, this area goes offline. That's why it becomes so hard to calm down or think clearly when triggered.
And finally, the hippocampus, the organizer of memory. This helps put experiences into context and sequence, but trauma disrupts hippocampal function, so memories remain fragmented, timeless, and sensory-based. Sounds, smells, body sensations, rather than coherent stories.
So the result is that traumatic memories are experienced not as something that happened in the past, but as if they're happening right now? That's intense, Marcus.
Exactly. And this explains everything about how memory works in trauma, Sarah. Normal memory is organized with a beginning, middle, and end. Traumatic memory, it's fragmented, sensory, emotional, often without words. A combat veteran might not recall details of a battle, but will jump at the sound of fireworks.
And this is why traditional talk therapy often fails, because the traumatic memory isn't accessible through rational language. Marcus, this completely changes how we think about healing, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Now, Sarah, let's talk about something that really hits home. Trauma in childhood. This is especially devastating because a child's brain and personality are still developing. Secure attachment with caregivers normally teaches children safety, self-regulation, and trust.
But trauma in this critical stage literally rewires the child's brain to expect danger, mistrust others, and disconnect from their body. Marcus, the effects can include learning difficulties, emotional dysregulation, problems with relationships, and higher risk of physical illness later in life.
It's heartbreaking when you think about it. Now, let's look at how trauma shows up in daily life for adults. Sarah, these symptoms are so common that people often don't realize they're connected to past trauma.
Emotional symptoms include shame, guilt, anger, chronic anxiety, depression. Cognitive symptoms, intrusive thoughts, inability to concentrate, dissociation. Physical symptoms like chronic pain, sleep disturbances, digestive issues, immune system problems. And relational symptoms, mistrust, fear of intimacy, cycles of conflict, reenacting trauma patterns.
Sarah, as I'm hearing you list these symptoms, I'm thinking about how many people might be listening right now and recognizing themselves. And that leads us to something Kolk argues passionately, that unhealed trauma fuels major societal issues.
We're talking domestic violence, child abuse, criminal behavior, substance abuse epidemics. Without addressing trauma, attempts to solve these problems remain superficial. It's like treating symptoms while ignoring the root cause.
Which brings us to our final point today, the need for new approaches. Traditional psychiatry has relied heavily on medication and talk therapy, but these approaches often fail to reach the core of trauma.
Because drugs can numb symptoms, but don't heal the underlying body memory. And talking doesn't access those nonverbal sensory imprints of trauma. So trauma requires body-based and integrative approaches.
Sarah, before we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge something. This has been heavy material, and if anyone listening is recognizing themselves in these descriptions, that takes courage.
Absolutely, Marcus. And what gives me hope is that this is just part one. Kolk doesn't leave us hanging. The rest of his book is all about the new therapeutic paths, the body-based approaches that actually work. There is hope for healing.
That's exactly right. The key takeaways from today: trauma isn't just in the mind. It's imprinted in the body and brain. It's widespread and often hidden. It reshapes the nervous system, leaving people stuck in survival responses. Children are particularly vulnerable, and early trauma has lifelong effects. And standard treatments aren't enough. New therapeutic paths are needed.
Before we go, Marcus, what's your biggest takeaway from today's content?
For me, it's that phrase, the body keeps the score. It completely reframes how I think about healing. It's not just about changing thoughts or taking medication. The body literally remembers, and the body needs to be part of the healing process.
For me, it's the validation. So many people struggle with symptoms they can't explain, and this gives them a framework to understand that their experiences make sense. There's a reason they feel the way they do, and more importantly, there's a path forward.
Beautifully said, Sarah. Everyone, this is part one of our series on The Body Keeps the Score. In our upcoming episodes, we'll be diving into the healing approaches, the therapies that actually work, and the practical steps you can take.
Make sure you subscribe to Story Essence Podcast so you don't miss any part of this transformative series. And if today's episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear this message.
Until next time, remember, understanding is the first step toward healing. Thanks for joining us on Story Essence Podcast.
Take care of yourselves, everyone. We'll see you next time.